Welcome, everybody, to Monday Night Muscle. I'm joined by the legendary voice of professional bodybuilding, my co-host, Bob Cicherillo, along with your reigning, defending, undisputed Mr. Olympia champion from Tennessee, Brandon Curry. Brandon, we're at the Mr. Olympia headquarters here in Arizona, and we are headed to Las Vegas this December for the first time. Competition's been moved. Bob, you've been doing the Olympia emceeing for some 15 years now. We're moving out of the Orleans Arena onto the main strip there at Planet Hollywood. What can we expect?
I can tell you this, you're going to expect a Zappos Theater full of screaming fans. They are chomping at the bit. There's been no bodybuilding going on this year. Let's face it. All this COVID nonsense and craziness out there. Shows have been at a minimum. Mm-hmm. So the fans that we got, I can't wait for this Olympia to come up. New facility on the strip. History in the making, and this guy defending the title.
Well, speaking of history, it's been since 2005, I think it went, or 2004, that the Olympia was on the strip at the Mandalay Bay.
Mandalay Bay, yeah.
And Brandon, you've been competing over at the Orleans Arena. How many times have you been in the Olympia?
Let's see, my first year was 2011, so I think I'm probably maybe 5 stints in Olympia. Give or take a year.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Was that the first year Phil Heath won the Mr. Olympia?
That is the first year.
Yes, it was. So your memory is still there, my friend,
so,
despite your age.
Some 9 years ago already, and
hard to believe because I remember Phil coming in like it was yesterday, mm-hmm. and here we are a decade later, and you know what's interesting? You mentioned Phil in that first Olympia because Phil might be in this coming Olympia.
It's a strong possibility. That window is closing for him as far as the conversation. He might be retired by the time we see Phil Heath come back.
True, but we all got to remember something. And you know, people kind of tended to write Phil off after he lost the title to Shawn Rhoden, except for one thing you got to consider. I think, and just my opinion, but I know a lot of people share it. Phil Heath could have easily won that Olympia, and that's not a knock against Shawn Rhoden. But, and I've said this before in other interviews, it's not so much that Shawn won the Olympia as that Phil lost it. Phil loses the Olympia because of his midsection.
Right.
That's it. If you take all the other body parts, I don't know. He's beaten Shawn pretty good and handily on some of those. And Shawn looked great, don't get me wrong. But if Phil's midsection is what it was 2 years prior to that, he wins his record tying Olympia. So you can't take that out. So the 41-year-old Phil Heath returning to the Olympia might just be as deadly as the last time he won the Olympia.
But Brandon, what do you think when we start dropping these ages? Dexter's going to be 51, Phil 41. Does age even factor into your economy of preparation to defend the top championship?
Age for meaning my age or their age?
Your age, their age. Do you even pay attention to these guys?
You know, not really. I mean, you know, if Phil's ready to come back, if he's confident to come back, I think he'll be ready back. I mean, why not? If I think I can beat a guy and get you know, $400,000 or whatever, why would I sit on the couch? So you know, depending on his health, depending on the conditions of what he thinks his midsection is going to look like, if that's the only question that we have on the table, you know, he should come back.
In the event that they all come back, and we've talked earlier about
Big Ramy, Rolly Winkler.
Well, let's just stick with Olympians, okay? Dexter Jackson, yourself, Shawn Rhoden makes his way back, and Phil Heath. So the first time in history you've got 4 Mr. Olympias. Out of that lineup, out of those 3 other guys, who would you worry about the most in terms of possibly upsetting you? Is it Phil? Is it Dexter in his last Olympia? He's got a lot on the line here. Or is it Shawn Rhoden making his return?
William Bonac. No. But
no way we're letting you get out of that one, champ.
Yeah.
Come on now.
No, if they came back to the stage, of course, you know, Phil's probably, you know, he's got the biggest pedigree, so you know he's got to be the biggest threat.
Sure.
He's brought it to the table so many times, and I'm sure he would love to match that record. So if he does come back, that'll be the fire that drives him. So he would probably be the most dangerous. But then, you know, you can't count out Shawn Rhoden because he needs vindication. You know, he's been through a lot, and he has a lot to prove. So both of those guys could be dangerous, you know, definitely dangerous. And Dexter, you know, Dexter's retiring, so I don't know how that's hitting him, how that's affecting him. You know, he may be just like my last hurrah, or he may be trying to pull all tricks he can for this year. So that's a big question mark. But like I say, Phil has definitely got the biggest pedigree. He's, in my mind, he's
Shawn, have you ever seen 4 guys that had more to prove in your life than hypothetically if these 4?
Coming out of this COVID-19 thing, and a lot of athletes have had nothing but time to reflect. And if you're a forward thinker, you're thinking, can I make history? Do I have an opportunity to make history? And of course, Kai Green coming out of off the couch to try to have one more run at it. And then you got James Flex Lewis. And so we're talking about all these other guys. I mean, Brandon knows exactly what he's up against. I imagine you're going to rise to the occasion because of the gravity of the situation. Some people don't rise to the occasion so well. We've seen some bodybuilders get to that big stage and they just can't make it work on that day. Cedric McMillan, God bless his heart, he's a great bodybuilder. It just hasn't happened on the Olympia stage. Big Ramy, another one. You see him coming all year long, and then you get to Olympia. Sometimes the occasion's too big for certain personalities. Brandon has risen to the occasion. He's come up from the back of the pack, and there he sits on the top, and he's proven it by winning those other 3 Arnolds. Phil Heath, a study of consistency. His last show, he was the first runner-up. That's not a big tumble.
Talk about a line. We haven't even mentioned Bonac or Rulli Winkler yet.
Again,
you talk about a huge lineup and a potential. But Flex Lewis, I want to key in that one for a second since you mentioned it, Shawn. Now you're pretty close with Flex, a lot of years now. Making his way from the 212, never to be topped again, 7-time champ, to the open division now. How scary is that?
Well, it's just a story waiting to be told. I mean, we speculate that he's always, you hear that he's always pushed down into the 212 category. He could have been ready a whole lot sooner. Maybe in the 220s is some rumors, but we know bodybuilding is full of rumors.
Right.
So we'll have to see if where he stands when he gets on stage. I mean, he has a lot to prove. Will we see him bring up his size to be able to compete with the guys and still bring the condition is the question. Will him and Neil Hill as a team have the heads to be in the game and make the proper decisions when it comes to, okay, is he going to come in very, very conditioned and peeled like he normally presents? Or is he going to come in with a lot fuller package to kind of stand with the big boys? And whether they think they can challenge me, of course, on stage.
Now, Shawn, you're the guy to ask this because clearly if there was a 212 division back in your day, you would have been the Olympia champ for years. However, you're the perfect person to ask this. How much of a fine line is Flex Lewis on in terms of weight? Again, we've heard rumors. We've seen pictures. I mean, we've seen him at 220-ish. Looks like a freak. We've seen him at 212 winning the Olympia. Where's he got to be to make the most improvements without stepping over the line? That's a real, real fine line.
Yeah, I mean, we saw before him Mohammed Bin Aziza. We go all the way back to 1990 when Mohammed Bin Aziza took out a very young, fresh, raw Dorian Yates. Mohammed Bin Aziza couldn't have been 190 pounds. The next time we saw him after that, he packed on so much weight on that short little frame that he kind of took himself out of the running. By 92, he was getting 5th in the Olympia, and he was never the same because he continually got bigger. Flex, in my opinion, has got to do what got him there. You go messing around with the formula too much by trying to add a little bit here and a little bit there, it could take away from what made him who he is. And we'll have a reason to point and say, look, he's 10 pounds heavier, he's been off for a whole year, and it would all come down to numbers. I think he's got to pretend that this is a 212 competition, do what he used to do to get to that 212 preparation, and let the chips fall where they may. Maybe he can experiment a little bit from Friday to Saturday. We've seen Phil Heath change. They call him Mr. Saturday Night. Typically comes on a little bit stronger in the evening. But if Flex tries to come in 10 pounds bigger because he took 2 years away from the stage, I don't know that he was doing the championship Olympia training the way that you've been doing every single year. When you take a little time off, it doesn't mean you're making your body better. You're in maintenance mode. So if I'm Flex Lewis, I'm going to try to do what made me the 7-time champion, and I'm not going to mess with that very much at all. Maybe give or take a couple of pounds, but I don't want to come in 10, 15 pounds heavier.
Brandon, isn't Bonac really literally in the same boat as Flex Lewis? I mean, he's obviously not one of the taller guys. Him and Flex are about the same height, give or take. Bonac, obviously, a tremendous amount of muscle. But it seems like he's in that same position where if he goes up in weight, and we saw that, I don't know if it was not last year, but the year before, I think it was. It actually detracted from his physique because he tends to look a little more blocky. So is he in that same boat as Flex where there's a real fine line there? If he goes up too much, it's going to hurt him. If he comes down too much, he's not big enough to contend.
When I analyze his Flex physique specifically, I'm looking at he has a long torso. You know, what happens with the thickness of that torso is what's going to affect how he's going to look on stage with the weight if he chooses to add more weight. You know, we're looking at the pecs, we're looking at how they belly, we're looking at the shoulders, we're looking at how they flow. Everything flows pretty well now, but if he thickens up in the middle a little bit with that added weight, it's going to throw everything off, and we're going to have what people were talking about as that Bonac situation where he's overmaxed. So how close is Flex to being maxed out, we'll only tell by if he adds more weight and brings it to the stage, in prime condition. And like I said, those photos that we see of him at 220 and stuff, we know what social media does with the photo. We know that's a spotlight. We know those kind of things that create the shadowing. We know those looks, and they're spectacular, and they get the fans going, and they're well needed for that. But as promotion, until he steps on stage under those Olympia lights.
The biggest question mark out of this Olympia of everybody, I think, has got to be Big Ramy.
It's always been, huh?
Well, and that's a great response, even though we didn't even get into it yet. He's been a question mark for years, but much like a Cedric McMillan, when does that ship sail?
Well, before I start talking too much about Big Ramy, I got to consider the fact that you got Rolly Winkler, who's very much similar to Big Ramy, just kind of waiting for him to arrive. He showed us.
And the People's Champ.
Yeah, the People's Champ. But listen. The guy that was third in the Olympia last year, what's his name?
The guy who was third.
Nobody knows the name.
You won the Olympia. Who was that?
Who was third behind you? It was William Bonek, and then it was the Iranian.
Dexter Jackson.
No.
Hadi Choopan.
Hadi Choopan.
Almost forgot about Hadi.
I don't want to be disrespectful because again, he's in Iran, so we have a tendency to forget about Hadi Choopan. He's just not in the limelight. Nobody's really trumping that horn. But you got to consider him before you even get to Big Ramy. And the question is whether or not he can get here, because he struggled to get here last year, and even in that struggle as a last-minute entry, he wound up in third place. And Flex has got to get past that kid.
Well, let's talk pure physique still. Listen, he's been a question mark for years. We've all known, he's been a name on everybody's list. He could be a potential Mr. Olympia and all that stuff, and he hasn't quite materialized. But let's break it down, Shawn. That's what we're here for. Does he have the tools to be Mr.? If Big Ramy shows up in 100% everything, can he win the Olympia?
I think he can, from the standpoint that he would have to be peeled, and we've not seen the peeled Big Ramy that we've been waiting for every single year. And we can say the same about Cedric McMillan, and we can say the same thing about Rolly Winkler. Those three guys have a tendency to not peak on the big stage. That's why I said some people can rise to the occasion, and other people, the pressure of the occasion of the moment has them holding water, has them cramping up, has too many hands in the crock pot there and mixing and matching, and they're not so cocksure of what they're doing. When you're dealing with a veteran like Brandon, when you're dealing with some veterans like William Bonek, we pretty much know what we're going to get. It's not going to be a huge variance because there's not a lot that they have to really improve on. When you start picking it apart, does Big Ramy have thighs that are too big? I'd love to see him bring his thighs down. But when he brings down his thighs, I need to see some more detail on the back. There's a give and take and a yin and a yang. And of course, Rolly Winkler, when he was trying to rip up his quadriceps and his hamstrings, he tore his hamstring. So these athletes are in a very delicate situation when you try to really ratchet it up. Brandon, a Kai Green, or a Phil Heath, it seemed like they had the right formula for a very long, extended period of time, and no one's come in to shake up the apple cart since.
Brandon, what did you think of Hadi Choopan last year?
It's not my first outing with Hadi. Was it 2017? San Marino, he beat me. I placed third. Technically, that wasn't a show I was going in with the idea to win. I just won the week before, and all I wanted to do was qualify the Olympia. All I did was sign up for 2 shows just in case. So I didn't go there to win, and I knew probably Cedric would take it, just looking at it. But I wasn't looking for Hadi. But I learned a lot about Hadi there. I underestimated him a lot there, but I learned a lot about him on stage. So he's a great bodybuilder, well polished. His presentation, his stage game is phenomenal. And that's the thing that I don't think anybody expected at the Olympia. If they were watching closely, they would have saw what he did in, was it Toronto or Vancouver?
Is that Toronto?
No, it wasn't Toronto.
Was it Vancouver?
Vancouver.
Canada.
Somewhere in Canada.
Against Nathan, when him and Nathan battled it out, basically what you saw the professionalism of Hadi on stage, his stage game. He just outshined Nathan, even though his conditioning was better as well. It should have been closer, but he left Nathan looking like, okay, he really gave the advantage to Hadi because of what he didn't prepare for against Hadi. He wasn't expecting it.
Sure.
Coming to the Olympia stage, I was able to see all that and preview that. I knew what Hadi was going to bring to the stage. I knew I'd have to present myself in a certain way to keep Hadi, in the place that he was, because he's going to try to dominate the stage. He's going to try to dominate position.
He did a hell of a job for the most part. He had a lot of fans out there.
Yeah, he's going to do that. He's going to do that. And, other competitors wasn't ready. I know William wasn't ready for it. William was mad at me because I was following suit, trying to be competitive. But once he realized, okay, I'm playing the game. So, Hadi's going to be polished. He's going to take every advantage you give him, and he's a great bodybuilder. My hat goes off to him. So, these guys, Hadi, that first outing, it was a surprise. Now everybody's going to be prepared for what Hadi does. So with the preparation that everybody knows what he's going to be on stage and his dominance that he can bring to the stage, I think it's going to be a lot different story for 2020.
There's another fight because Hadi's last big run-in was against James Flex Lewis in Korea. And right. Flex Lewis won that show, but arguably Hadi had him on the ropes. A lot of people thought Hadi should have actually won that show. So it'll be interesting to see all of those guys in the lineup, and then you got to stand next to the champion and figure out who's on and who's off.
I tell you what, it's going to be nasty on that stage. It's going to be nasty. I mean, man, come on. It's going to be so ego-driven. It's going to be so much people trying to outshine each other and be dominant. And if you're not mentally ready to take on that stage and to take on every single one of those guys and challenge them and prove to the judges that you're the best guy on that day, don't even show up.
Yeah. Brandon, when you're backstage, the fans always like the insight of what goes on behind the scenes. You guys are all backstage. At some point, everybody peels off, getting oiled up, getting the pump on, and all that stuff. Can you ascertain anything when you're backstage, or are you kind of trying to X that out of your mind because it is different under the lights? I mean, everybody's got a different. Sometimes it's smoke and mirrors. I mean, let's face it. Mm-hmm. You'll see a real small guy. I remember meeting Francis Bonfato years ago at Gold's. Mm-hmm. He was literally like one of the smallest people I've ever met.
Right.
Like he was tiny. But this guy took off his stuff, and oh my God, like his
illusion. It
was an illusion. So when you're backstage, can you size anybody up? Can you get anything out of that?
Yeah, it's a lot of. I'm not gonna give away all my secrets, but it's a lot of psychology going on backstage. It's a lot of psychology, and you got to be intentional backstage. Of course, it's going to be friendly. You're going to be relaxing. You're going to be following your proper stages of preparation. But it's a lot of psychological things going on backstage. There's certain indicators. If you're capable of watching them, you know what position that you're in before you even hit that stage. It's a certain kind of attention that you will receive from your fellow competitors, from other officials, from different things that you know that you're looking. At least you're looking like you're going to take the show, or you're looking in a good position. So you got to be able to read the environment. It's like, you got to be the weatherman on that day,
sure,
to kind of get an idea. And then a lot of the psychology is you got to know when to do certain things. You got to know when somebody's looking at you. You got to know things because you can get in it's a lot of psychology. You can get in some guys.
Shawn, that sounds like it hasn't changed a whole lot from your day backstage. There was a whole bunch of that going on.
Well, I mean, at the same time, it is a very individualized sport. So even though we see the enemy, they're not our friend. Today, it seems like they're much more friendly. He's friends with William Bonek. He's friends. There's a lot more mutual camaraderie like that. But we were all fighting. Had our own little fights amongst each other that were going on, waging our war. So we kind of kept to ourselves a little bit more. But I wanted to ask an interesting question because Bob and I competed for many years. Neither of us had the opportunity to hold that Sandow Trophy. When you won that thing, tell us about how it changed the economy of your life. Because one year you're fifth in the Mr. Olympia, I believe it was. You went from fifth place to first. Mm-hmm. So that year you go home, you're fifth place. You're not really the talk of the town. You clearly served notice because that was the first time you were ever in the top five. Mm-hmm. But then you leapfrogged over everyone. What is the view like from the top as you travel the world and you enter the gyms and you're seeing the fans and you have a front row seat at being the crown prince?
It's like, man, it's like getting a whole new set of glasses, that gives you a whole new perception of everything around you. You gain an awareness that you just didn't have before about, the fan aspect, the industry aspect, and then the way that I guess you monetize your capitalize on what you've done. So all these doors open up, and you get a clearer view. It's like when you're sitting at this higher peak. Mm-hmm. When you're looking up at the peak, you're hopeful that what's on top, and you kind of got an idea of what's on top, but you just don't really see it for what it is. But you don't see the responsibility as well.
Right.
You don't see all the extra things, all the tedious things that come with being the champion. So it's like you always got to be on your guard. You got to be on your A game, and I've seen that mistake happen to a lot of guys because, being a champ, a lot of people coming after you in different ways for different reasons.
True, especially with social media.
Yeah, so with social media and, anybody, they're trying to capitalize on what you've accomplished.
Mm-hmm.
And, some of them don't always have the best intentions. So you always got to be on your guard. You got to have people around you that have, good insight, and able to see through some of the intentions of other people around you because, it can be lonely on top if you're all by yourself. So the key is surrounding yourself with like-minded people that, love you, really care about you. You can't move away from your base because otherwise these title and accolades can just destroy you as a person. If you get
Brandon, talk to me about Dexter Jackson. You've competed against him for some years. He's been around so long. You were actually looking up to him when you were coming up the ranks, trying to get you won the U.S. You turned pro the year he won the Olympia, just to give some perspective out there. But talk to me what it means to you as a fan. Take yourself out as a competitor against him. Put yourself in the fan seat of competing with Dexter. This is his final show. This is it. He's called it a day. He's going to give it up on the Olympia stage, which I think is very fitting for the champ to go out. So talk to me about that.
Dexter was one of the guys when I opened up the magazines when I first started really paying attention to bodybuilding that really just caught my eye. Considering he was just, active and he was just so consistent and, they called him the Blade and you looked at him and you understood why. It just was clear as day, just super, super shredded. But I just, as a fan and as what he's accomplished, it's just so, so impressive to see him able to compete for so long and at such a high level. And my only goal was, man, I want to be better than Dexter. I want to be better than Dexter. And I will say this, Dexter gave me a hard time coming to the sport. He'll tell you himself. He really gave me a hard time as a rookie. He really challenged me, but that motivated me to be better and better. And it took me forever to finally capitalize on Dexter. And when I did, he gave me my props. Like a man should. But I have all due respect for him and what he's accomplished in this sport.
Well, Brandon, we appreciate you stopping by here at the set, and we're going to wrap things up here for a great edition of Monday Night Muscle. For Shawn Ray, I'm Bob Cicherillo. We're out.